welcome and thank you for joining us on your Love Your Lake session. Today, our Zoom talk for 2025. This is the second one. My name is Kirsten and I'm a volunteer with the LKO, and I'd like to introduce the board to you. Board members, Dale couldn't be here, but we've got Wendy Hanson. Wendy wants to wave for us. There we go. Perfect. We've got Tanya. Tanya, do you want to wave for us? There we go. Terrific. We've got Kathy Conlon. Kathy, do you want to say hi? Great. We've got Scott Sharman. I want to say hi. And I think I saw Lance there. Lance, did you want to say hello? There he is. There we go. There's Lance. And we also have Scott McPhee, who is unable to be here from the board, Marilyn, Joel, and Italo that are unable to be with us, but they're all part of the board. They all work hard and they spend a lot of time bringing these sessions and seminars to you, our LKO community. Remembering that these talks are meant to be informative, to bring us the communities together, and for all of us to help and learn how to protect and bring awareness about our beautiful lake and its surroundings. So Ed Poropat will be speaking about Haliburton birds today and how they are managing. At the conclusion, there'll be questions. Feel free to use the chat function, and as we'll all be muted, we will work through the question and answers as they happen. And as I mentioned, for those that are just joining, one other person there. As you're just joining, remembering this is recorded, and it will be available for those that are not able to be here tonight. It'll be later available on our LKO YouTube channel. And if you were unable to be at our last one, it was a very informative one. Feel free to go to our YouTube LKO channel and watch it there at your convenience. So without further ado, I'll keep admitting people. And Wendy, do you want to take over? Or we're going to first have Tanya read the land acknowledgement. So over to you, Tanya.
As we gather here today, we respectfully acknowledge that we are situated on traditional territories of the Anishinaabe Mississauga lands and the traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. Kashagawigmog, an Anishinaabe name meaning Lake of Long and Winding Waters, served for millennia as an important passageway and meeting area for the First Nations people. We are grateful for the opportunity to live here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I'm going to send it over to Wendy, who's going to introduce to us the speaker for today.
Ed Poropat is a retired award-winning educator. When not teaching, Ed has spent countless hours in the field pursuing one of his other passions, natural history. Over his 50 years of experience, he has developed a respectable knowledge of Ontario's flora and fauna. He has conducted avian, herpetological, insect, and botanical surveys for a variety of firms and institutions. Ed's interest in the natural world really sparked during his formative years in university, where he worked as a park naturalist at Bon Echo and Nays Provincial Parks, spent summers conducting bird surveys with the Canadian Wildlife Service, and worked for a planning firm conducting field inventories throughout the Carolinian Zone. He spent several summers assisting with wetland evaluations across Ontario. More recently, he has been involved with species at risk surveys across central and northern Ontario. Ed has been a regional coordinator for several province-wide atlases, including Ontario Breeding Birds 2 and 3, Ontario Reptiles and Amphibians, Rare Breeding Birds, and Ontario Mammals. He is the present compiler of the Minden Christmas bird count. Ed now works part-time as an ecologist and as an active volunteer with the Haliburton Highlands Land Trust. Welcome to Ed, and over to you.
Thank you so much. I'll just spotlight Ed. Oops, there we go. We'll remove Wendy and then enjoy.
Well, thank you, Wendy, and thank you all. I appreciate very much being here, and yeah, thank you for having me. I'll share my screen and we'll get started right away. Okay, so I'd like to take you on a bit of a journey, a 40-year perspective. Our goal here today is just to have a look at the state of birds in especially in southern Haliburton County. I've tried to focus as much as possible to include Lake Kashkawigamog, but hopefully you'll get a sense of what's happening in our area from an avian perspective. So a quick overview of what we're going to cover. Basically, the first thing would be like, where are you getting your data from? We're going to be looking at what species appear to be doing well. We're going to be looking at declining species in the area. I know probably many people have questions about, how's our loon population doing? And then I'd like to end off with just, what can you do to help birds and your lake? And then hopefully leave some time for questions at the end. So I have data from a bunch of different sources, but a lot of it is coming from the State of Canada's Birds Report that came out in October of 2024. We'll also be using the Breeding Bird Atlases 1, 2, and 3. And very quickly, these atlases show both distribution of birds in Ontario, but also abundance. And they've been spread 20 years apart. So the first atlas was from 81 to 85. The second one was 2001 to 2005. And we are in the midst of the third one now, 2021 to 2025. Some of the data will be from the Breeding Bird Survey. We've got 58 years of data from the Minden Christmas Bird Count, and then some other citizen science platforms like the Loon Survey, Nightjar Survey, Woodcock Survey, etc. So let's have a quick peek. Who's doing well out there? Waterfowl in general are doing quite well. You can see that they're up about 46%. And a lot of this is on account of wetland conservation and restoration efforts that are happening. So quite a few species of waterfowl are doing really well, especially geese and swans. There still are some that are struggling and not doing so well. Raptors are up 35%. And again, because of the banning of DDT, we've seen an upsurge in the population of most raptors. But one more time, there are some that are struggling, and especially the grassland species. And finally, wetland birds are showing a 21% increase, although once again, there are some that are not doing so well. So let's have a look at maybe a few of the species that are doing really well and have a look at their story. So the trumpeter swan is an incredible success story. Historically, these birds were native to Ontario and bred right across the province. However, they were extirpated from Ontario in the late 1800s, largely due to overhunting and some habitat loss. And eventually, I believe in the 30s, the species was in real trouble. And it was critically endangered globally. And at one point, we were actually down to 70 birds. And it was thought that the species was going to go extinct until they found another population in Alaska. At that point, they began a captive breeding program and a reintroduction program with the hopes of restoring the species. And so this happened in Wymarsh, Midland, and that was where this all started. And thankfully, huge success. So the bird is no longer at risk. We have over 2,000 trumpeter swans now in Ontario, and it's no longer at risk in Ontario, in Canada, or globally. And I would say it's now an expected bird in Haliburton County. And I suspect some of you have probably seen pairs of these birds on Lake Kashigawigamog. They breed locally in isolated lakes and ponds and wetlands. And you can, if you haven't seen one yet, you can expect to, because they are here and they're increasing. So these are some of the maps that that I want to share with you. So this is OBBA2, means Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas 2. So this is the second atlas in 2001 to 2005. And then here's the next one. You can see Haliburton County is about here. And you can see during the first atlas, the species didn't even show up. During the second atlas, you can see the reintroduction program taking place here. Here's Midland, Marsh, and boom, here we are now. All those red squares are areas where the species has been confirmed to be breeding. So really wonderful story. We have the sandhill crane, another good news story. So this bird was almost driven to extinction in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And again, largely due to overhunting. So it was protected by the Migratory Birds Act, and populations have slowly rebounded as birds have recolonized historical breeding areas. They've seen enormous increases in population. And in fact, I think a recent study showed that there was a 2,400% increase since 1970. So we now have over 100,000 of these birds in Ontario. So our map again. Have a peek here. This is 1985. And you can see there's only a few little red marks where the species was confirmed as breeding in back in the early 80s. These gray ones are just areas where they were observed and there's no breeding evidence at all. So you can see there's a small pocket here. Here we are now, and you can see that they are just pushing east, and the species have become quite common. So it's wonderful to see. The peregrine falcon is an iconic bird. So this species suffered greatly due to DDT, which is a pesticide that was used extensively in the 1950s to control crop pests throughout North America. Research showed over time that it was affecting reproduction, not just in raptors, but in other birds also. And it was thinning their eggshells. And then when the birds would try to incubate their eggs, the eggs would crack and they'd fail nest. So by the 1960s, this species was gone from Ontario. They started a captive breeding program and tried to recover the species using what they called hacking boxes, where they would put up boxes on cliff faces and on buildings and try to feed them blindly so that the birds weren't imprinting on people. And again, people can make a difference. Look at the early 80s and try to even find a red dot on there where the bird was confirmed. And you can see there's one here in Montreal. here we are now. And once again, try to ignore the gray because those are just sightings. But look at all the red marks. And these are possible or probable breeding, the orange and the yellow. So once again, a fabulous good news story. The species has returned. And they're returning to many of the historical nesting sites, including here in Haliburton. So we can call this bird a local once again. I know of at least 5 breeding locations in Haliburton County now. So a wonderful good news story. And very similar story with bald eagle. Again, a victim of DDT, but has shown enormous comeback. So here's the 1985 map during the first atlas. Here we are now. You can see all these red marks are nesting birds. So really nice to see them back. And that's a bird that you probably see fairly frequently on Lake Cashagawigamog, especially in the fall and any open water in the winter. They'll be around looking for fish to snag. All right, let's go to the other extreme and see who's struggling. Grassland birds. So grassland species are down 67%. And that's largely on account of habitat loss and intensification of agricultural practices. We have aerial foragers or aerial insectivores. They're down 43%. So these are species that feed in the air. So you think of like swallows and swifts and nighthawks. So they're struggling and due largely to a decrease in insect populations, likely, although it's not fully understood yet. And then we have the long distance migrants, many of our warblers, for example, that breed here, but spend their winters in the neotropics in Central America and South America. So they're down 29%. And again, probably the big thing is habitat loss for them. So let's have a look at a couple of species. The bobolink. So this is a bird, I call it the banjo bird because when you hear it singing over a grassland, it sounds like somebody plunking a banjo. It has a very distinctive song and call notes. Anyways, the bobolink has declined 80% since 1970. That's a decline of about 2.9% every year. And it's really struggling both in the province and in Haliburton County also. As I mentioned, the biggest reason is loss of habitat, both in breeding habitat, but also in wintering habitat. As we intensify agricultural practices to try to get the most out of the land that we have, this species is not doing well. So, just things like mowing during nesting time, if you can hold off on mowing into mid-July, then the bird has a chance of fledging their young and surviving, or leaving strips of, uncut areas. But otherwise, it's having a hard time. So let's have a look at the map. So here we are in 1985. You can see a fair bit of red, but I would like to remind everyone that this is already 15 years after 1970. So probably the species had been declining steadily already. Here we are today. And you can see that a lot of the areas here in central Ontario, the bird has not been recorded, it's disappeared. The other thing to note too, that's kind of interesting, you see all the red in 1985. So these were confirmed breeding pairs or colonies, and you can see not nearly as much here. And that begs the question, why is that? So the birds are being observed, but for some reason, they're not being confirmed as breeders. Purple martin is another species, this is a aerial forager related to swallows. And there's been a large decrease noted in all of the aerial foragers, but a 90% decline in Ontario for purple martin since 1970. That's like a 7% per year decline. So it's really struggling. So here we are, 1985. You can see most of the birds are along the Great Lakes. But we did have colonies right in Haliburton. In fact, there was one, if you know where the gas station is, right on the main street here by the lake. There used to be a colony right in front there, and it disappeared in about 1995 and has not been since. So the exact cause of decline is not really well understood. One of the speculations is that pesticides are affecting prey density, and especially like neonicotinoids, which are water soluble. So, when it rains, they end up in our waterways. They affect the aquatic insect populations and then reduce the food availability for these species. Then we have the nightjars, the whippoorwills and the nighthawks. Again, 35% decline in whippoorwills. A lot of that has to do with a changing habitat. We now suppress fire, and forest succession is happening, and these are not good things for whippoorwill. So, back, if you even think 50 years ago, there was a much younger forest around here, and that served the whippoorwill well. Whereas nowadays, with our forests maturing, with us putting out any fires, etc., it makes it more difficult for the whippoorwill. The good news is the population has stabilized, it appears, but way below its 1970 numbers. The nighthawk that we see here is doing even more poorly. 65% decline in this species. And they used to breed on the grocery store and the bank roof in town, and they're gone. For me to see one of these birds a year in Haliburton County, I consider myself lucky. So they're not doing well. And yet another one. This is a chimney swift. Chimney swifts used to occur in Haliburton and in Minden. If you go to the grocery store, to the bank, you could hear them chittering above you. And as of, I think, 2018, I was just looking at my notes, 2018 was the last year that they occurred in Haliburton village. So I have not seen or heard one since. Now, that's not the whole story, because you can see that there's still some around. Here we are in 2024, and you can see there are records of them. Here we are in 1985. However, these birds also nest in old tree cavities and such, but they'll be pairs or really small colonies, whereas in the cities where they're adapted to breed in chimneys, you could have colonies of hundreds of birds, and those appear to be gone from our landscape. Okay, people ask me, all right, Haliburton, what is Haliburton known for from a birding perspective? And my answer is usually warblers. So these are tiny little gems. All of them are insect eaters, so they make their way down to the neotropics during the winter. Thankfully, most of them are actually doing fairly well. They're at least holding their own, but some of them are not. So if you go, many of you have probably heard of Point Pelee. If you go to Point Pelee, if you have a 25 species warbler day, it's considered a really successful birding day. Well, 23 of these species breed right here. So we're super lucky. Let's have a look. So this is one that is not doing so well. This is the Canada warbler, and it's one of our species at risk. And the reason for that is it's shown a 63% decline since 1970. That's about 2% each year. Now, what's interesting with this one is it breeds in coniferous swamps, which if you think of Haliburton County, we have tons of coniferous swamps. So what's the scoop? And it turns out it's the wintering range. So these birds fly to Ecuador and overwinter in the low to medium range in the Andes. And that, of course, is being converted to agriculture, and so habitat loss is happening at an unprecedented rate down there. Mourning warbler is yet another one. This one showed steep declines in the 1980s. It's about 54% below 1970 population levels. So these guys nest in scrubby secondary growth, which again, we have a lot of, or it would appear. However, in their wintering grounds, a lot of that stuff gets cleared out for farming or for agriculture, etc. But there's positive news. So scientists and activists have recognized that recognize the need for conservation work that spans geopolitical boundaries, which of course the birds don't recognize. So there's been some hemispheric alliances that have formed in an attempt to help these migratory species as they fly from the north where they breed down to the south where they winter. And, it's interesting, we think of these, a lot of the birds that we have around Lake Kashkawigamog, we think of them as our birds. And in fact, they're really just visitors. They spend most of their lives in the tropics, and they only come up here to breed, have their young, and then they fly back to the tropics again. Have a quick peek, see how we're doing for time. Looks okay. Okay, the common loon. I'm sure many of you are wondering, okay, how are our loons doing? The news is kind of good and bad. In general, since 1980, loon numbers have declined. Now, they were not doing so well in the 80s, but the population actually increased until about 2000. And then since 2000, it's been declining steadily. And so people started to get worried, and there were some large studies that were done specifically on loons and looking at all kinds of things, including like, okay, human disturbance, shoreline development, lake fluctuations, are cormorants having some sort of impact, offshore wind turbines, diseases, all sorts of things. Anyways, after some extensive studies, it appears that the main culprit is climate change. And they're looking at 3 possible pathways that this can happen. So number one, and again, these are all to some degree guesses, but increasing the water temperature in conjunction with increased flooding and drought periods increases the movement of mercury up the food chain to the fish. And of course, loons are apex predators in the lakes. So when they consume these fish with elevated mercury levels, it affects their nervous system. It makes them more lethargic and causes them to raise fewer chicks to independence. And what's interesting, or what I find interesting, is although we've decreased mercury significantly over several decades, think of Sudbury back in the 70s, with the big stack. Mercury is very persistent, and so even though we've managed to reduce the amount of mercury being dumped into our atmosphere, it's very persistent and still appears to be increasing in fish in some lakes. Another pathway, another possibility is that these extreme precipitation events caused by climate change cause higher turbidity through sedimentation. And of course, that'll affect, because loons are visual animals and visual hunters, that'll affect their hunting, and consequently will also affect feeding their young. A final pathway that's been proposed is actually the wintering grounds. And many of you probably are very familiar with your loons and know that it takes 4 or 5 years for a loon to become sexually mature. And so where do they go before that? Well, they apparently disappear. And what they found is that the immatures all fly out to the eastern seaboard, and they actually spend the first 3, 4, even 5 years of their lives in salt water. And that's where they just hang out there and feed until they are sexually mature, and then they make their way back and try to find territories in areas close to where they were born. Well, because climate change is affecting the way currents work and temperature of the oceans, it's been suggested that there's been changes to the distribution and the abundance of the fish that they feed on. So you can see it's a very complex problem that requires a lot more study to find out exactly what's going on. So that's a bit of background on the loons. The good news is that although there's been steady declines in loon populations, a lot of it apparently is from Atlantic Canada, which is rather interesting. Ontario does not seem to be showing as significant declines. So that's one positive thing. All right. Well, after all that, although the situation can seem futile, we can still make a difference. And many species have stabilized their population numbers. The sad part is many of them have stabilized to percentages way below where they were in 1970. So what can we do to help? You're going to hear me preach about this, but please, please, please keep your cats indoors. Cats are responsible for 100 to 350 million bird deaths in Canada every year. They're incredible predators, and just sending them outside. I've heard people say, "Oh, my cat doesn't do that." They're incredibly efficient predators, and they have the second highest impact after habitat loss. So please keep your cats indoors. If you must take your cat outside, it's been suggested to leash them. You can take them for a walk on a leash, or some people have built enclosures for their cats outside so the cat can at least go outside. But yeah, that's one huge thing that you can do right away. Leashing dogs in sensitive areas, especially areas where birds are resting or nesting. One of the things I think of often is, it's wonderful to let your dog run on a beach, but given the time of year, sometimes there's birds that land on that beach, like shorebirds, and it's a critical time for them to fatten up on their flight south. So any disturbance that happens actually impedes that. Creating and protecting habitat, just things like, planting native plants in your yard is helpful. Reducing pesticide use, even making your windows safer, especially if you have bird feeders, to keep from window strikes happening. You can help fight climate change through any ways that you can. Most of you know many ways, using less fossil fuels, wasting less food, using less energy at home. Those are just some of the ways. Volunteer for conservation. You can take part in citizen science projects. There's lots. I'll just show you a few in a minute. And there's so many platforms out there, but you can do tree plantings. There's habitat restoration projects, invasive species control. Any of those are super helpful. You could choose bird-friendly products. Things like if you can afford it, or organic produce, bird-friendly coffee. There's looking at labels for ocean-wise, for example, recommended seafood, Canadian grass-fed beef. Any of those will help. And finally, buy less, produce less waste. Single-use plastics, disposing of garbage and recycling properly, and just buying less. We've become a real consumer society, but it takes energy to create all that stuff. So anything we can do to reduce that would be ultimately incredibly helpful. Okay, and finally, some local citizen science projects you might be interested in. So there's a platform called iNaturalist. You can download the app. It's really cool. I've really got into it in the last probably 5 years or so, but it allows you to take a photo of anything that's living, and it will try to identify it for you. And the AI that it uses is actually really good. So very often it's correct. And so you now know what the species is that you photographed, and then you can upload it into iNaturalist, and experts often will come on there and say, yep, you're correct. And then it becomes what they call research grade. And at that point, it can be used by scientists and researchers that are looking at trends or data in certain species. So, you know, your photo and your information that you upload can then become very useful to somebody doing research. There's eBird, which is mostly a birding, kind of a checklist birding platform that was put out by Cornell. And you can, like, you know, if you're just a starting birder, you can, again, load that on your phone, and it's essentially a checklist. So you look out your window and you say, I've got 5 black-capped chickadees. So you put in 5 chickadees and, you know, a couple of nuthatches, etc., and you upload the stuff, and all of that, again, gets used by researchers looking at bird abundance, looking at movement patterns in birds and such. So it becomes really helpful. And all you need is, you know, just to be a pair of binoculars and to look out your window. The Minden Christmas bird count, I'll just mention really quickly, has been happening here for 58 years now. It was started by a fellow named Dennis Barry, and he ran it for 50 years, every year, which is just amazing. Anyway, so we now have 58 years of data of birds in the winter. And so looking through some of that is really interesting, because there are several species that we've seen disappear over the years, including the amazing Canada jay, which is used to be quite common in this part of Ontario and now has retreated north. And then there's all kinds of targeted species surveys. You can do backyard feeder watch. You can do the Great Backyard Bird Count, which I think was just recently done. If you're more adept at birding, you can do a breeding bird survey. There's owl surveys, and loons, woodcocks, nightjars, and I think there's a whole bunch of others. So it's just a matter of, you know, get into Google and look it up, and I'm sure you can find something that would be interesting for you. And that is about it.
Well, thank you so much, Ed. That was wonderful. If you wouldn't mind stop sharing your screen, that would be great. We've got lots of questions coming in, which is so amazing, which is a great part about what we do in these Love Your Lake sessions. So great. Thank you so much. So I have one that was sent in earlier, so I'm going to honor that one first. The question is, for the past 3 years in the forest in Harcourt Park, they've become eerily silent at night. So no frogs, toads, or crickets, actually, etc. What's going on there? Do you have an idea of what's going on there?
I'm going to say I don't know on that one. Eerily quiet. I mean, numbers of frogs fluctuate to a degree, but I mean, I still go out and am deafened by spring peepers in the springtime. So if it's happening locally, I would I would need more information to know what exactly is going on, whether it be, ponds drying up, changing habitat.
Well,
Yeah,
this person goes on to make, this might give you more information. Says, "Hi, I have a natural green space with mixed bush and varying terrain behind my permanent residence located within the Barrie city limits. It's teeming with life at night despite the drone of the city and automobiles. Also, it's very noticeable that the decline in insects is catastrophic in Harcourt. And sitting inside the cottage at night, my windows seem to be thickly covered with every kind of bug you can imagine. Now, you can't actually count the dozen of bugs that find their way to the light. Is this serious and acute decline in insects a direct cause for the decline in birds?"
yes. Is the
Plain and
easy
simple,
answer.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, I can point to certain groups of insects for sure. But I'm thinking right now of some of the larger moths, the silk moths. There's been large declines noted in some of the large silk moths, and that is one of the things that whippoorwills and nighthawks feed on. So, but I think also I've also heard that people used to drive up to the cottage and your windshield would be just smeared with bugs, and those days are gone. So for whatever reason, whether it's pesticides in the water or what, but yeah, we're definitely seeing
a big correlation between the two.
for sure.
There's lots of questions, so I'm going to just honor them as they were sent through. I think it's the bobolink, is that you call it, the bobolink habitat?
Bobolink,
yeah. Is the bobolink's habitat loss also due to the previous grassland farmlands being reforested?
Yes, yeah, to a degree around here, but there's also areas where previously the species was quite common, and the numbers are. I mean, the habitat is intact, but the numbers have declined. So it's not just forest succession that is the culprit there.
Okay.
So,
thank you. Another question was, there used to be a large colony of barn swallows under the bridge on 21 between Cashagwamug and Sawyers Lake. They replaced the bridge years ago and the birds didn't return. Do you know of any colonies of barn swallows near and around Haliburton?
yes, so that's interesting. Whoever asked that question, because during one of the atlases, those birds disappeared from under the bridge, and it wasn't just the bridge construction. There was something else happening, and a lot of the swallows that used to nest under that bridge disappeared in like 1 or 2 years.
Right.
It happened very quickly. But there are barn swallow colonies around. Try to go to any fields with barns, and you'll see them flying over the fields, but also some nest underneath bridges. Like one I'm thinking of is just west of Carnarvon. There's the bridge at,
right.
I call it the Boschkong Narrows.
Yeah.
There's quite a colony that nests under that bridge.
Okay, well that's an interesting fact. To know about that. Another person asked, in our cottages in Harcourt Park, another Harcourt Park, and I'm wondering whether the peregrine and the eagles are vulnerable to the bird flu to the same extent in Haliburton as they are proving to be along the Lake Ontario shore, shoreline. We live in Coburg, where the local field naturalist groups have confirmed bird flu in dead geese, and the eagles are scavenging their carcasses. So I guess is the bird flu to the same extent happening there in Haliburton?
That's a really good question. I can't answer that.
Right.
I'm sure bird flu is present here. To what degree, that I can't answer. I don't know.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for that. There's another question. What about window strike? Many cottages have larger and larger windows these days? Basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that can be an issue for sure. I mean, one of the things that there are things that you can do to reduce window strikes. There are things that you can put up. There's spots.
Decals,
Yeah, decals of different kinds. If you feed birds and you have a large window, one thing that works really well is to move your feeders really close to the window so the birds can't build up speed when
that's
they
a good
strike.
thought.
So,
Oh, that's a really good thought. Okay, thank you for that. One person was asking, do you know anything about the wild turkeys? What's happening with the wild turkeys?
yeah, boom. Yeah, there. So that's another good news story, if you want to call it that. They have been reintroduced into Ontario after having, really low populations, and they have just gone right across Ontario to the point where I think they're actually having negative impacts on things like salamanders and fossorial snakes and such. So because they're constantly feeding and scratching, they're eating all kinds of stuff. So hopefully the numbers will at some point stabilize and decline a little bit. But at this point, they've just got so much to eat. They're just expanding and booming.
Wow. Yeah. We do see them a lot along our property. Do we have American woodcock in the Highlands?
We do. One of the citizen science projects that I do is a woodcock survey every spring. So yeah, if you go out just after the snow leaves and find an open area with brush around it close by. So I'm thinking now, if you know where the fish hatchery is.
Yeah.
So you've got that field there with brush around it. Well, the woodcocks come and display out in the field there, and you can go out with a flashlight at night, stay really still, home in on the call that they do. They'll jump up into the sky and do their little display. If you can see where it lands, once they're up flying, you can get closer and then shine the light on. You'll get a good look at them.
Oh, there you go. That's a fun activity. I hope the fish hatchery will be okay with us coming there. People coming.
You could do that most anywhere though, like any place you have a field.
Yeah. There you go. If you've got lots of property, there you go. Another question. These are great. Thank you everybody for sending these questions. This is what it's all about. So the more we ask questions, the more we learn. So how are owls doing, how are they owls doing in our area? Any insights?
Well, I would say good and bad. Barred owls seem to be doing really well. They're super common. Great horned owl is declining. And northern saw-whet owl, which is another owl that we have here, little tiny pint-sized fella, is also does not seem to be doing particularly well, but not as bad as the great horned owl. Great horned owls really seem to have declined.
Yeah. So a little bit of both kind of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And during the winter right now, there's a good chance you'll see owls because they'll often come to the feeders. We had a good cone crop last year, which means lots of rodents. And so those rodents are running around, scurrying around, looking for food under feeders, and a lot of barred owls are coming, for example, and just hanging out by the feeders, hoping that one of those fellas will pop their heads out and they have a quick meal.
There you go. The other question is, are all the species you've covered considered, in quotations, desirable?
Desirable?
Yeah, I'm not too sure what, I think it's Gary is getting at there, but I would assume they would always be desirable, except for, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's an interesting question because I think there are some species that people consider undesirable,
right,
like cormorant, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I mean, to me,
They're all
birds,
yeah.
yeah, every bird is desirable. They each play a role, and
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. Okay.
should be
Fair enough.
doing
Yeah.
what we can to protect all of them.
That's right. Yeah, just wanted to honor that question. One with other one that we got. Do you think the loss of large insects could be partly due to the light pollution? Due to light pollution, the light pollution rather, the insects.
I've never seen anything that correlates those two things. I would think it's more pesticides is my
Yeah,
feeling.
Mm.
Yeah, especially neonicotinoids.
Yeah, yeah, not a good thing. Another one, in summer's last few years, we have door knockers promoting the safe, organic, natural mosquito spray. Can you kindly comment? Obviously, the concern being the birds eating sprayed mosquitoes.
Which, like, I'm wondering, I know that some,
Insect repellent.
yeah.
I'm not too sure which ones they're promoting.
Yeah, I know that there's one thing that you can wear on your belt that releases like a, I don't know, some sort of, and I'm really against that because it doesn't just pick mosquitoes. I mean, you're killing everything around you, which I disagree with. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, I don't know which mosquito repellent exactly that would be that you spray in.
Yeah. Thank you. There's one here. Where are the chickadees?
That's a really good question. I think, and this is, I'm speculating now. So I was looking at the Christmas bird count numbers, and our numbers are up from last year, which actually surprised me a bit, but I think some of our chickadees cleared out, and they're usually resident birds. So they'll be here all year round. But I think in extreme times, they will flock up and they will head south to a degree to where they can find food. The issue here this year is there is very, very little natural food in the woods. And so many of our, like, you go for a walk out in the woods right now, it is deathly quiet out there. There's so few birds, especially compared to last year, when we had piles of birds everywhere. So I think some of the chickadees cleared out. Others that are regular at feeders know that those feeders are there, and they trust that they'll be filled and such, and they stick around. So I think the big picture, it would look like a reduction in numbers because some of them have moved.
Interesting. Back to the comment, the person was talking or asking your advice about the door knockers promoting. She's saying that the spray was garlic, if her memory is right. Still,
I've never even heard of that. So
yeah,
okay. Yeah, interesting.
No, there's someone about the chickadees. Someone saying lots of chickadees in Harcourt, but we feed them also nuthatchers and rosy and white ones as well. So that's kind of cool. Another comment that was put forward, just a suggestion, that they say that they put dots from Lee Valley out on the boathouse glass railing, and no more dead birds they've had. So well worth it if you're going to use glass handrails and things like that. So a very good point. Thank you, Marion and Chris, for Lee Valley. So that sounds great. And the last sort of question that's come through, is it possible, do you have a favorite bird, Ed?
Oh, I hate this question. You know what, I find that really difficult to answer. Yeah.
Top three, Ed.
Even top three.
Oh, so the answer, Heather, no, not so much.
Okay. There's the very last bird that I showed you in the in my slide program.
Yeah.
Was the scarlet tanager. If you've ever seen a scarlet tanager,
quite a beautiful bird.
it will blow your mind. I mean, they're just neon red with those black wings and tails. So certainly every time I see one, it takes my breath away. So probably that's in my top, oh, I don't know, 50. No.
50. There you go, Heather. Top 50. There we go. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I just wanted to make, oh, we have one new message here coming through. We are north in Haliburton County near the forest, and they have chickadees and nuthatchers and woodpeckers, but not one blue jay all winter long. Just our observations. Very good observations, Lori. Yeah.
And a good reason for that. So blue jays cleared out of central Ontario by the thousands in the fall. And the reason for that is because they store oak acorns and beech nuts. And so when you have a crop that fails, as we did this year, there was very few acorns and beech nuts. The blue jays know it, and they're like, we're out of here. We're heading south.
Well, there you go. Good. That there's a reason for that there, Lori. So I don't know if there's any more. Oh, one more question. Our window dots near feeders are very helpful, so no casualties. Another person that uses the window dots. So great resources and great helpful hints out there from everybody. So thank you to everybody. I just wanted to pass the torch over to Kathy right now. Kathy, one of the board members. I'm going to try and find you, Kathy, and spotlight you. There you are. Where are you? Oh, maybe I can't spotlight you. Kathy, I don't know if, oh, maybe I can do it this way. I'll try and spotlight you. But Kathy, do you want to talk quickly just at this point in time? We'll get you to start your video and to unmute yourself if you're there. Kathy,
I unmuted myself. Can you start the video?
I can't do that. You would have to do that.
No, it wouldn't let me.
Oh, Kathy.
It says because you stopped it.
Hold on, Kathy. Let me find you. Where are you? Kathy. Yeah, that's funny. Is that it?
No.
Okay, sorry, wrong Kathy. Let me just see.
Conlon.
Oh, no, I know who you are. There we go. There we go. Maybe that's why. Does that work?
Start my video.
There
Awesome.
she goes. Now we can spotlight her. There we go.
Okay. Oh, now I can see myself. Lucky me. And thank you ever so much for your incredible presentation and your fabulous photographs. And the really broad coverage that you did over so many different kinds of birds. I'm sure each of us have recognized a whole bunch of those. And so it really has touched us all. Just one point about the undesirable, I'm going to call starlings my undesirable because they chase away all the goldfinches from my bird feeder. Thank you so very much. And maybe we can look forward to you writing a weekly bird column, perhaps. Anyway, thank you so much, Ed. And we have an honorarium for you that we would really appreciate your being able to use in whatever way you like. Thank you so much, Ed.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy, and everybody else. I agree. Let's have a weekly or whatever from Ed, bird information. I think that's a lovely idea, assuming Ed's up for the challenge. Yeah, no, that's great. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming, those that are still here. We want to remind you about the next seminar that we'll be having by Kate Butler of the Haliburton Highlands Museum on Wednesday, March the 26th. There'll be information sent out through our e-blast, but she will be telling us all about some of the colorful people and places on the lake in the past. So make sure you register for that talk as well. Thank you again, Ed. It was a lovely time. You had lots of good questions, which I guess is always encouraging because that makes the talk even that much more let me just see what Heather's saying. Oh yeah, fly your maple leaf flags, everybody. Thank you, amazing talk. Thank you for your passion and your hard work, Ed. Thank you so much, everybody. We will look forward to seeing everybody again on March the 26th. But until then, everybody have a safe and healthy and stay warm and have a good night. So thank you so much, Ed.
Thank
And
you.
everybody for coming. Thank you so much.